Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Daniel Howard? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Daniel Charles Howard was born on November 11, 1965, and lived in the state of Idaho. After serving as a Marine, he became an Idaho State Trooper in 1994. This same year, Daniel married a woman named Kendi. She had been born on April 30, 1972. Kendi had a daughter named Brooke from a previous relationship. Daniel and Kendi went on to have a son together named Wyatt. The family lived in Lewiston, Idaho, moved to Powell, and finally to a house on 10 acres of land in Ethel. This small town is about an hour northeast of Spokane, Washington. Daniel continued working as a state trooper, and Kendi worked at a medical center. Eventually, the couple's net worth reached about $2 million. They owned a boat, a camper, and 2 plots of land at nearby Spirit Lake. In 2011, Daniel was dealing with a fugitive during a traffic stop when the fugitive backed his Jeep into him. In response, Daniel opened fire and killed a female passenger in the Jeep. He was cleared of any wrongdoing, but he felt as though the Idaho State Police never forgave him for killing the woman. In 2013, Kendi had an affair with a neighbor and friend named Matthew. When Daniel found out about the affair, he was not amused. He poured syrup on Matthew's vehicles and fired a shotgun at his house. This put the Idaho State Police in a sticky situation. They decided not to waffle on the issue and immediately placed Daniel on administrative leave. There was no sugarcoating it. Daniel should not have escalated above sweet talk. It wouldn't be long before Daniel found himself facing more problems with the law. In April 2014, Daniel was charged with grand theft, petty theft, and possession of an untagged deer in Kootenai County. Allegedly, he had taken thousands of rounds of ammunition from the state police. Daniel said he took the ammunition home out of convenience because his house was closer to the range than the police station. Daniel was also charged in Bonner County. There he faced grand theft, forgery, and title fraud for an incident involving a motorcycle. In November 2014, Daniel resigned from the Idaho State Police. In 2015, he accepted a plea bargain. Daniel entered an Alford plea for felony malicious injury to property and petty theft. This means that he accepted the consequences of guilt while maintaining his innocence. In addition, he pleaded guilty to fraud for using a fictitious name on a title application for a motorcycle and misdemeanor possession of a white-tailed deer without a tag. It has been said that the crimes of a man sometimes come back to haunt him. I wonder if Daniel ever has nightmares featuring a ghostly white-tailed deer floating above him and screaming, "Where's my tag, Daniel? Where's my tag?" Even without this terrifying apparition, it's clear that Daniel paid dearly for his crime. Daniel received a sentence of 3 years, but most of that was suspended. He only had to spend 120 days in jail. After being released from jail, Daniel found a job in Alaska working in oil fields. He would spend 3 weeks there and have 3 weeks off. His wife Kendi became lonely, and in the spring of 2020, she rekindled a relationship with an old lover from high school. His name was Daniel Prado. Due to the disorienting dilemma derived from double Daniels, I will refer to Kendi's lover by his last name, Prado. Kendi had big plans with her lover Prado. She met with a divorce attorney and started the process of purchasing a home in the town of Camilla, Idaho, where her family lived. Her dream was to open an antique store and reinvent herself. As part of this makeover, Kendi even made arrangements to get plastic surgery. On July 10, 2020, Daniel discovered that Kendi had been spending money using secret credit cards. He physically attacked her, causing bruises on her chest and arm. Kendi did not notify the police. On January 28, 2021, Daniel arrived back home from his job in Alaska, and Kendi picked him up at the airport. On the drive home, she told him that she wanted a divorce. On the next morning, January 29, Kendi woke up to a horrifying situation. She saw Daniel standing over her wearing dark clothing and black latex gloves. She couldn't tell what it was, but he had something in one of his hands. She made it to the bathroom and called her lover, Prado. He in turn called someone else, who called 911. When the police arrived, Kendi told them about the frightening incident and indicated that Daniel intended to kill her. The police remained at the house until Kendi could collect her belongings and leave. No charges were filed. Daniel communicated with Kendi throughout the day, saying that it was a misunderstanding, he was a changed man, and she was safe in the family house. He understood that they were going to get divorced. Daniel was happy to sit down, sign whatever documentation was necessary, and work out a fair division of their assets. Kendi returned to the Howard family house that same day. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On February 2, 2021, 4 days after Kendi returned home, Daniel called 911 at 10:43 p.m. He said that his wife Kendi had sustained a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and he was certain that she was dead. Here's what the police found during the course of their investigation. Kendi was dead in an upstairs bathroom from a gunshot wound to the head. It appeared as though the gun had been discharged when it was in her mouth. In the bathwater, there was a Taurus PT-738 semi-automatic pistol chambered in .380 ACP. This firearm, which was owned by Kendi, had been used to kill her. There was bruising all over Kendi's body, including her neck. Her jaw was broken, and she had sustained a second-degree burn on her right forearm. A duffel bag full of Kendi's clothing was sitting on the floor at the bottom of the stairs. When the police first entered the house, they noticed that the clothes dryer was running. 6 minutes were left in the cycle. They calculated that the dryer was activated at around the same time Daniel called 911. The dryer contained bath towels and bath mats. While the police were processing the scene, they noticed that Daniel was pretending to be hysterical. For instance, he was crying without tears. Daniel told the police that he was downstairs signing paperwork as Kendi was upstairs taking a bath. He heard a thud come from upstairs, but did not investigate. Over an hour later, he went upstairs and found Kendi in the bathtub. In April 2023, Daniel Howard was charged with first-degree murder and felony domestic battery. The second charge was from the July 10, 2020 assault on Kendi. This is when he discovered her secret credit cards. After the state presented their case, Daniel did not feel optimistic. He was free on bond during the trial and wearing an ankle monitor. Daniel drove to the Spokane International Airport, where he was arrested for violating the conditions of his bond. It was against the rules to get within 2 miles of an airport. Daniel explained how he was just helping to return a rental car for a friend. It seems clear that Daniel intended to rent a car for himself, cut off the ankle monitor, and drive away. The jury didn't hear about this incident or about Daniel's prior convictions. On March 19, 2024, Daniel Howard was found not guilty of first-degree murder, but guilty of second-degree murder and felony domestic battery. In May of that year, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now moving to my analysis. Daniel Howard maintains his innocence, and he has a few supporters. They argued that Kendi was depressed and was responsible for her own death. The state, of course, disagrees. They believe that Daniel was unwilling to lose money in a divorce. Therefore, he resorted to murder. This brings me to the question, was Daniel guilty of murder? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that he was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. Daniel had a history of serious criminal behavior. He was jealous, controlling, and obsessed with money. In 2013, he threatened a man who was having an affair with his wife. Daniel attacked Kendi about 7 months before she died. Not long before this attack, Kendi started having her second extramarital affair. It makes sense that Daniel would not have been happy about this situation. If anger about the affair did not give Daniel a motive to kill, then the financial losses associated with divorce may have. Kendi was making plans to leave Daniel permanently. 4 days before her death, she told him that she wanted a divorce. 1 day later, Kendi claimed that she woke up to find Daniel standing over her, wearing dark clothing and black latex gloves. On the day she died, Daniel started the clothes dryer at around the same time he called 911. When the police arrived, he pretended that he was hysterical. Even though he had told the operator his wife had no pulse, he kept asking first responders about Kendi's condition. Did he believe that she was going to be resurrected from the dead? Daniel had recently showered, which did not make sense given the circumstances. When the police told Daniel they were going to test his hands for gunshot residue, he put his hands in his pockets and twisted them as if he was trying to wipe something off his hands. Kendi had injuries unrelated to the gunshot wound, including bruises, a broken jaw, and a burn on her arm. The duffel bag of clothing at the bottom of the steps makes it seem like Kendi was getting ready to leave. Daniel was familiar with firearms. He was in the Marines, and he had been a state trooper. Yet he described the gunshot that killed Kendi as sounding like a thud. It took him over an hour to go upstairs to investigate. How could Daniel not recognize a gunshot coming from upstairs, especially when the bathroom door was open? The house was not that big. During his trial, Daniel violated the terms of his bond by driving to an airport. A medical expert for the state said that Kendi was dead before she sustained the gunshot wound. The small amount of blood in the bathtub supported this theory. Moving to the exculpatory factors, the DNA of an unknown man was found on the Taurus pistol that killed Kendi. The gun belonged to her. No DNA was found under her fingernails, and her fingernails were not broken. There were no signs of a struggle in the house. No blood was found anywhere else in the house other than in the bathtub. Daniel did not have gunshot residue on his hands. His DNA was not on the weapon, and he did not have defensive wounds anywhere on his body. The small amount of blood could be explained by it going down the drain of the bathtub. Kendi was having an affair, which is consistent with a midlife crisis. Maybe she was just tired and frustrated. A medical expert for the defense testified that Kendi died as a result of the gunshot wound. She was alive when the gun was discharged. When considering all the evidence in this case, do I believe that Daniel Howard was guilty of murder? Yes, I believe he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Daniel was self-centered, impulsive, irrational, vindictive, petty, manipulative, deceptive, cold, callous, greedy, miserly, aggressive, jealous, lacked empathy, and had a sense of entitlement. He was unhappy that Kendi was cheating on him, but what really made him mad was the idea of losing his money. When Kendi told him that she was going to divorce him, Daniel decided to murder her. During the incident that occurred 4 days before Kendi died, when she woke up to see Daniel standing over her, he was getting ready to kill her. Maybe he was going to put a pistol in her mouth and pull the trigger. Perhaps he was going to smother her. Either way, it was his intent to murder her. Kendi was extremely fortunate to have caught Daniel before he completed his mission. She realized that he was going to kill her. She even said that to the police. Even so, Kendi felt compelled to return to the family house. She told people that she caught Daniel in the act, and he would never be unwise enough to kill her now. Kendi was lost in a fantasy world fueled by infidelity. She was trying to force her situation to come out the way she wanted so she could be with her lover. As it turns out, Daniel was doing something similar, not related to cheating, but with a fantasy about keeping all his money. Both Kendi and Daniel were ignoring obvious risks. Kendi was ignoring the risk of dying, and Daniel was ignoring the risk of going to prison for life. Unfortunately, both risks were ultimately realized. Those are my thoughts in the case of Daniel Howard. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They consistently generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.